Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining. Tom Morelli here with Wilco, and I am excited to share that I am joined by Mike Moorhouse of the Moorhouse Group. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic as well. We're beyond excited as we're going to be talking through a lot of different topics on change management today. The three key ones are going to be the current state of change management, tips and tools for executing on change management. And then we're going to have Mike kind of give us a peek behind the curtain of what does the future of change management hold. And Mike, we hear throughout this organization and anywhere in the business world, the pains and negative connotation that goes with change management. But this is really a huge passion of yours. Can you give us a little bit of a background of why it is such a passion for you and that's where you really try to focus on?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that occurred to me a couple of years ago is that, I've been in the business, mortgage business for a long time. And change management used to be a project that you might start and it would take a few months and then you would get a break and then you might have another one. And there were these episodic events. Um, Over time, as companies, it doesn't matter if it's mortgage banking or actually any other company, we've moved from those episodic events into a constant state of change management. And if you just think about automation and where it's come from, you guys are in the middle of it. Automation used to be a project that you deployed and there was a break, but nowadays it's constant, and it may not end up being the company that's actually doing something new with their automation. It could
Hmm.
be a vendor that you're working with. So we've entered into this stage where we're in perpetual change, and it's a really big difference from where we've been at. So the passion part of it, or what I'll say, when we get in there, that and you start looking at it, whether it's a passion or just a necessity for most everybody, is you've got to be able to navigate it not only for yourself if you're leading a company, but then you've also got to be able to guide your people through it. And I'm sure you've heard the statistics that 70% of all change management projects, um, and I'm going to use I don't want to use the term failure, but they don't get the results that were expected.
Sure.
And it almost always falls on the human side of it. So my interest has always been, how do we make things better? So and change management is what we do as companies now, constantly.
Yeah. And I want to double click into what you mentioned about change management is continuous now. And when you think with the advent of AI and
Mhm.
just this whole new suite of products or tools or solutions that exist out there, how does change management really come into play with keeping folks on which projects to select so that teams aren't burnt out? Because it kind of seems like in this industry today, there is that burnout even before you start a new project.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and probably one of the things that we tend to help companies with the most is really taking an inventory of what kind of cognitive debt, if you want to call it that, across the workforce you have.
Hmm.
Um, you
I
know,
like that
uh,
phrase cognitive debt.
yeah, I'd love to tell you that I invented it, but it's not. It's an actual neuroscience thing, and it's really it comes out to where change has actually outstripped the ability of individuals to replenish their energy reserves, their mental energy reserves.
Hmm.
And so I think the starting point for most organizations is really understanding where you're at. Take stock of it. And there's a lot of great assessments. I've got some that I use, but there's a lot that are out there. And at a very basic level, there's this readiness for change assessment that goes out, and it gives you the ability to understand where your people are at. And it may vary from department to department. If you had an operations department in a mortgage banking company that is, they've not had a lot of changes, they may have reserves that the marketing group doesn't have, or vice versa, or loan officers. So, really understanding where you're at is probably the most important thing, and that's as a leader of an individual company. Um, and if you don't do that, then you've already failed before you started.
Hmm.
And maybe you slow it down, maybe you push it out. And so I think those are the things that you start there, and that gets you going down the road. Did that
Yeah.
answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we last spoke, you had mentioned the phrase the true cost of change and how it's not just the physical, what's getting done from a process, but
Hmm.
you said the cognitive debt. There's that intellectual and emotional capital because it's not individuals aren't just going to be focused on this change. It's going to impact everything else that they're responsible for. So you mentioned taking inventory of that. What are some tips for someone who's responsible for rolling out an initiative or managing a project to properly take that inventory of the individuals who are going to be involved and impacted?
Hmm. I think one of the things that I see, and in the work that I do, I work with companies that, um, and I will say, are trying to either increase performance or growth, or they're stuck. And there's some common things that we really take a look at. One of them is really the communication within an organization. So um, when you have trouble moving something forward, it's usually because there's some resistance from human beings, and a lot of it is not because they're worried about change. It could end up they're tired, but in some cases they just really don't understand where you want them to go.
Sure.
And so I think that, one of the things that I always try to do is go out and understand what the leaders are trying to do, but what is it that the staff really understands? And there's almost always a gap. So
Yeah.
you want to take inventory, but you also want to go out and start connecting with people and getting them involved in that change management process earlier. And if you think about uh, this sort of communication system that runs within an organization, whether it end up being, Teams, Slack, anything else, text messages, there's a lot of communication that's going on
Yeah.
about the initiatives. If you don't address it directly, the narrative's going to get controlled by somebody else. It could be somebody that doesn't want it. So there's fear, there's all these other pieces. So, to answer your question, is get out, connect, talk to people. I just posted something uh, online. It says, "Get out, talk to people. It's your job." And
It's funny because it's such a simple concept.
it is.
I
It
saw
is.
someone else on LinkedIn recently posting about whatever happened to picking up the phone. We
That's
take
actually
shortcut, or sorry, go ahead.
that was part of it. Is pick up the phone, ditch the
Yeah.
email. You can't manage from an email account.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
so from that standpoint, are there some shortcuts really, or is it really, hey, you've got to interact. If there's a stakeholder, you need to reach out and you need to connect with them pretty much on an individual basis to make sure that message is happening. Because in some cases, if it's a large organization, there may just not be enough hours in the day to have that one-on-one communication. So, what are some steps that someone can do to keep that human touch, keep that transparency, but actually make yourself scalable in managing that change?
yeah, I think the first step is really clarifying uh, why you have the project, and we'll use the term generically, the project. Why is it being done? What's it going to involve? What are the expected outcomes? Clarify that, step one. Secondly, is identify what we'll call key stakeholders, because this, depending on the size of the company, you can't talk to everybody, and you've got to be able to get them to have a deep understanding, so they, in essence, become champions. I mean, it's just like any project champion. You've got to do that, but you've got to put the work in. And I think one of the things that we've seen, uh, I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but there's been a deterioration in the face to
We can do
face.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Poor COVID. But there's been this deterioration in connecting and actually communicating at a level where people have discussions. And keep in mind that one of the things that's changed is the top down management is not gone, but it's certainly eroded. It's more of a you're talking to people, you're giving them goals and objectives, you're pointing them down that path. So
Mhm.
it isn't one of those things where you say, Tom, you need to do this, and you're going to be happy about it. You've got to invest some time in all of this. That extra pre-work, even though a lot of people go, this is obvious, everybody should get it, they should know why I'm doing this, is really critical, because what you're trying to kill is the friction. And that friction doesn't have to be very much if it's spread out over a lot of people or a couple of departments. So
Mhm.
it's really get out there, connect with the stakeholders. If you can have a town hall, do it.
Yeah.
And it's like anything. Where are we
And
going?
so what I'm really hearing you emphasize is there aren't shortcuts. It's there needs to be as much planning and communication as possible.
Yeah.
But you can make it more scalable, and you use the word champion. And a lot of times, from my project management days, it's okay, who's your executive sponsor? Who's your champion? But now it's you have to throw an S onto the end of that.
Yeah.
You need to
Or
work
or
and have
quite a
multiple
few.
champions, whether it's in all the departments, it could be horizontally, it could be vertically across an
Yeah.
organization, but you need multiple people who can reinforce. And the other aspect that you hit is ideally there isn't, but there's probably always going to be someone that may be naysaying or resistance to that change. And it might just not be because that's their nature. They may be burnt out, they may not be clear on it. But if you have those other champions, they can help proactively address or further that communication to alleviate that before it becomes a larger problem and pervasive throughout an
Mm,
organization.
absolutely. And if somebody's resistant, and not that we want to really classify people, but let's just say it's a department head that's resistant, find out why they're resistant. There may be
Yep.
a reason that's really valid. Um, and I can go back to the Y2K change, um, where my division ended up getting the first version of the new LOS being deployed. And
Mhm.
I had it for 30 days and I kicked it back to my, I had to go back on the old one. Um, and my pushback was well received after we had a lot of discussions. But it helps. So if there's resistance, find out why. There could be, if your people are good, somebody's resisting, find out why they're doing it. But
Yep.
a lot of this is that pre-work that you've got to be able to do. And I think that the concept that I try to get across to everybody is that the more automation that we have, the more that we're really have to start thinking about creating the mindsets and managing the mindsets within the organization. I know that sounds a little bit soft, but the reality is we've all seen organizations that have a real growth mindset, and to use a real basic one, and they're different than the ones that don't have a growth mindset. So it's part of a leader's job to do that today.
Yeah. And so I feel like this is a natural segue into that middle topic of executing
Mm-hmm.
change management. And I really liked what you had to say about listening to, okay, if someone is pushing back against the change, really understanding the why. Because in very select cases, is it going to be they're just resisting change because that's their nature? There's probably a good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't successfully implement change in an organization if it's just here is mandate push because you're going to deal with everything that we just talked about. But part of that change management isn't just, hey, you need to advocate for it. You need to be listening and understanding and use that as a feedback loop to, hey, is this actually a new part of scope that we didn't consider? Or do we just need to tailor our messaging to the organization because they're concerned about something that we're already taking care of? Maybe it just wasn't clear in our message. So I feel like that's a huge part of this execution and how people can be successful.
No, I think you're right. I mean, when it comes down to the execution side, and I'll quote some stats that I think everybody's heard is that when you look at it in employee engagement, you've got 33%, somewhere between 30 to 33% of employees are engaged. So I'm going to use a 33% out, and I think it was the Gallup Gallup survey of 2024. I could be wrong, but
Mhm.
33% of employees are engaged, which that means is that they're going to end up not only doing their job, but they're going to end up doing the extra things that gets done. That sort of ancillary work that moves an organization forward. 50% are disengaged, and you have 17% that are actively disengaged. Those are the bad seeds, the ones that are working against things. So if you look at those statistics, and your company may be higher or lower, but there's very few companies are going to be more than 50% engaged. That tells you right now that you have different audiences that you have to address. So the ones that are going to be engaged, they're probably going to be the ones that are going to jump on it right away. And that could end up being somebody that's not a supervisor. It could end up being just somebody at a line level.
Hmm.
You've got to get to that middle group. And that's when you take inventory. You're going to find out disengagement could end up being, I don't know where I fit. I don't know what I'm doing, or maybe I just don't like I just don't like my job. Taking the inventory gives you an idea. It's just like going out and doing marketing. You've got different audience segments. You're going to address them differently, and
Hmm.
it doesn't take a lot of work. It just takes some thought. And so if you can do that, then when it comes down to execution, you will be able to tailor the message to the people in a correct fashion. Always keep an eye out for that third group, because those are the ones that are generally, if they're in a power position, they can sort of amplify the friction that goes in. Does that
Sure.
does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And want to drill into that middle 50%
Mm-hmm.
because something that clicked in my mind is you can actually have a double benefit going through a change management exercise where let's use that average 50% of your staff are disengaged. What better time than now to figure out why they are disengaged or approaching things passively and get them converted? This is the opportunity. It goes back to the communication and understanding the why. Use it. Hey, we're doing this change, but you find out maybe they're burnt on something else that already exists. Leverage that to, okay,
Mm-hmm.
can we get you engaged? Can we get you converted to that 33% bucket and start to grow that? I see that as a huge ancillary benefit to going through change management. And then to that other 17%, if I'm remembering your stats correctly and the math's working right in my head,
Yeah.
what suggestions do you have? Because they're inherently, if they're actively working against, that's much harder than someone who's just disengaged. What tips do you have for getting them converted? Or is that, hey, if you find someone who's actively disengaged, it's you need to figure out ways to separate. And it's tougher when you said those people could be in
Yeah.
leadership. What are your
Yeah.
suggestions for folks to handle that?
Going back to the get out, talk to people. It's your job. Pick up the phone.
Hmm.
First thing is engage. You've got to engage with those people, and I don't think it's generally a secret who they are. I mean, after being in the in the corporate world for 40 plus years,
I was gonna say a couple of years.
couple of years, yeah. Um, there's no secrets, right? There's just lack of being engaged. I always knew who the difficult people were, the naysayers, and that's a nice way of putting it. But you engage with them, you've got to make a decision. Um, I think one of the things that's really important is that the whole sense of why people find their job fulfilling, and is there's some really interesting statistics that are out there, and these have been pretty consistent. A lot of companies say, well, I'm going to pay Tom more. Mike, we're going to give him a raise, we're going to give him a title. That is not the number one driver. The number one driver is a sense of belonging, and which is, when I saw that, I thought that's a little bit odd. And the way it's defined is that not only do you have a seat at the table, but you're accepted, you're listened to, your opinions taken into consideration, and you feel like you're part of the company. And that's generally probably going to end up being that 33%.
Yeah.
The the next one is sort of an interesting one: is, are you energized by your work? That's number two. That's what motivates people to stay at a company. And number three is inclusion, which means you have a seat at the table, but you don't
Hmm.
necessarily, you're part of the fabric. So how do you get people there? Um, there's a very simple human sort of a process we go through. We all want to know, you know, where we are. In others, where am I going? Where am I at today? Where am I going to go? In others, it could end up being, what am I going to do between now and the end of the year? What's my career path? How do I fit into the success of the journey? I'm talking at a business level. How does what I do matter?
Hmm.
And what are the expected outcomes? It's a real simple process. And so when you start engaging with people, you just say, Tom, you know what? You are in this department, and it's really important that you guys buy in because of this. This is how it fits in with our overall strategy. These are the benefits. This is,
Hmm.
you're painting a picture. people don't go through the process of that consciously. It's an unconscious thing that people have. You're not filling those areas up, and if you don't fill those up as a leader, something else is, and it's doubt, disengagement, whatever happens to go in there. But if you take the time to do that, and we're talking about change management, it's we're doing this project because of this. This is how it aligns with our goals. This is how you fit in. This is how you're going to make it successful. This is what the outcome is going to be for you after it's done. And this is where it's going to not only lead your department, the company, but it's also going to end up helping you out. You've got to
Mhm.
be able to provide a picture. And I know it sounds a little bit soft, but gosh darn it, if you're interviewing for a new job, those are all the questions you want to know, get answered,
Yeah.
right? So the same thing is for retention and engagement.
Yeah. And what something that I'm gleaning from what you mentioned is that if you're improperly executing change management, you're unintentionally working against yourself.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned individuals wanting that sense of belonging or wanting to find meaning in their work. I too have been at organizations where a change has come down from the top. And I thought I was engaged, but it didn't make sense what was trying to happen. So all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden it's whoa, 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 this doesn't make sense. I'm going to try to push back. Now, looking back at this 10 something years ago, I probably could have done a better job with the next steps of how I handled some of that
Yeah. Well,
that pushback and sharing my feedback.
yeah.
But unintentionally, you can take someone who is active and would be behind and want to champion something, but because the why wasn't properly communicated, all of a sudden they've become disengaged or now are actively pushing back against what it is you're trying to do. But if you look at
Yeah.
it from the positive side, there could be some folks who maybe this isn't going to impact their day to day in any way, shape, or form, but it's just an FYI. What better way to make them feel like they belong even more, where it's something that's unrelated to
Mm-hmm.
them, but they understand why it's happening? Because then it's, oh, subliminally, they're feeling like, hey, I belong. Someone heard something that I may have said, or I get this. Leadership knows how to interact with me and communicate with me.
Mm-hmm.
There is that other unintentional benefit at play here.
Oh, you've nailed it, and I'll use an
I'll
example.
give
I
myself the pat on the back for
No, no,
that.
it's absolutely. Here's what's happened to us that we're going to use automation as an example because
Hmm.
that's what's top of mind for everybody, right? Um, this actually happened. I won't say who it is, but there's this uproar within a company, and it came after a meeting where the CEO came out and said, "We're really excited about AI.
Hmm.
We're going to deploy it throughout the company. It's going to change, basically the way that we operate, and it's going to be this technology that's going to impact every one of you, and we're really excited about it. And so,
Hmm.
as we're going to start announcing projects, we'll be going through this, and we'll be telling you about what we're going to be doing."
Yeah.
So, a big part of the workforce said, "My job is changing." They didn't tell me what it's changing to. Am I going to have a job?
Yeah.
Is what I like to do in my job what I get to do? And so what they did is they actually communicated something that was meant to be positive, but because they didn't check all the boxes, there's that vacuum that got
Hmm.
filled up with, all the things that we, human elements, the fear, worry, all those things. And I know that a lot of this sounds soft, but the reality is we're now in a position where we have to manage the mindsets of our people just like any other asset. I'm not talking about manipulation, but the biggest friction point in any organization is no longer technology.
Yeah.
It's people. So you're either going to get momentum out of them or you're going to get friction. I don't think there's a lot in between.
Yeah. And I love that you bring that up. And I think, again, great segue into what does the future hold for change management? And we can use that example of AI, where people are afraid, is this going to take my job? Am I going to be
Mm-hmm.
replaced? Or even from Wilco's side, as we roll out our production optimization platform, there's always that, well, hey, am I going to have a job? Like, what is this going to look like? What is my role going to look like in this new world? And something that we are actively getting ahead of is we don't want to be in the business of just eliminating jobs. We want to enhance skill sets and
Hmm.
allow lenders to do more with their existing resources. And that's become a huge part of our talk track is being upfront and letting folks throughout the organization understand like, yep, some of this stuff is going to be automated, but these things that you are specialized in, these skill sets that have you engaged on a day in, day out basis that you are excited for, that's where you're going to be able to spend more of your time. Or there's the opportunity to learn whole new skill sets, to cross train or potentially
Yeah.
upskill, to take that next leap because you're not mired down in some of the minutia of navigating legacy systems or having to double check everyone's previous work. But to tie that in, like with what you originally said, it needs to be transparent and straightforward from the beginning because an automation and AI is, whether we like it or not, it's synonymous now with job loss. And anyone who's hearing that in an industry or organization is going to have that immediate, oh no, what does this mean? Am I going to be
Hmm.
employed? Do I need to look for a new job? But
Yeah.
it takes just a few extra sentences to address it head on and bring comfort and not leave your organization and all the individuals with some of those open questions that, a lot of time it is uncomfortable to raise your hand and say, hey, am I still going to have a job after this? But it's going to be
Yeah.
pervasive and you're going to have others starting to talk about it.
No, absolutely. I think that AI is a really good example, and there's a lot of AI hype. There's some. I think there's some things that are really important that leaders have to really focus in on. Number one, what is really useful, because everybody's so excited about it, but the actual uh, P&L effect on AI deployment so far has been negligible at best. I think was it 5, 6, 7% of all AI efforts show any P&L effect. And
That's really interesting.
Yeah, no,
That's
I think it was the MIT study. I think it was 5%, but I'll send it off to you.
yeah.
And so certainly that's this upfront group, and it'll probably have some more effect down the road. But the reality is that it's really the messaging, and it's at understand your workforce. Really important. That's one of the things I help companies too. Is what are the skill sets they have? What are they thinking about? The technical side of the business, P&Ls, goals and objectives, and that's a much easier thing to do, particularly if you've done it for, decades. It's a lot easier, but the biggest variable we have are the people. So understand your workforce, understand where they're at. Also understand the technology and automations that you're going to bring in. So let's say that you're going to deploy something very simple as a new marketing system, right?
Mhm.
Which, and it's one of the few areas where AI has made some impacts. Now, everybody can argue that it all looks the same. There's a sameness, right, to anything that's AI generated. But there's some really good work that's been done about now we're going to shift you from being somebody that's a designer that is going to end up using your creative mind to be able to write prompts and be able to do the initial setup, maybe
Mhm.
even do the initial images and then have AI do it. So it's going to rework their day. And the
Sure.
way I like to describe it is technology's got to augment what you're doing, not replace it, and keep a
Yep.
human in the loop. That I think is not articulated. So if you go ahead and you talk about that and you think deeply about what that technology is going to do,
Mhm.
you guys have given a lot of thought to your product.
Yep.
Uh, a lot of the technology that's dropping in right now is, sort of like a seagull that drops something on your picnic table, right? It's AI, boom,
Dig into that.
and
What is getting dropped onto that picnic
yeah,
table?
AI hype.
Yeah.
But it lands there, and maybe there's some incremental improvements somewhere. but
Hmm.
the overall effect is it just worries everybody. So
Yeah.
be very, as a leader, understand what that technology is for, and then you have to be able to articulate it very clearly to everybody that works for you, what it's going to do and how they fit in. And I'm old enough to remember, and we'll talk about the mortgage business, that um, we weren't data checkers for most of our job. I mean, data checking was probably 20%. And if you look
Hmm.
at almost any job, whether it be a closer, an underwriter, heck, even
Yeah.
loan officers, it's all about compliance. It's all doing all these data checking. And so we've created an algorithm through technology that shaped people's minds. And I think that's the other part.
Hmm.
You have to think about the technology and what it's going to do internally to what people think. Whether you like it or not, every technology item that you deploy, whether it be an LOS, whether it be something else, actually shapes the way people work. But over time, it actually shapes the way people think.
Yeah.
And that goes back to managing that mindset and the cognitive capital that you have.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much want to unpack from everything you just said, but I'm actually going to start right back from the top where you
Mhm.
talked about 5 or 7% impact on P&L, which you magnify that across a lot of zeros.
Mhm.
You can find some savings there, but it also speaks to, is it the right change that's being implemented? Is it the right products that and solutions that are being implemented? And it makes me think to a book that I'm in the middle of reading, Reset by Dan Heath. Shout out to Jeff
Mhm.
Benjamin for recommending it again. But there's a segment of it that talks about the amount of projects that are put into play that end up having no impact on the outcomes of a
Yeah.
specific process. And it's because they're automating or focusing something that is not a value driver of that process. And as you're going through any sort of product or solution selection, you need to be focused on, is this impacting something that is on that critical path
Mhm.
or is it on that value stream? Because if you're automating or spending time doing something that's ancillary and not driving that, more often than not, it's going to have zero impact on your outcomes. And you will have just burnt out your organization on another change management project that has done zero to impacting your bottom line or
Yeah.
that borrower experience.
And if you just look at it from I'm the 17%. Yeah, they've deployed these last four projects and they've done
Yeah.
nothing. They don't even know what they're doing. So there's this. I have some, as you probably figured out, some things that little hooks here. There's silent communication of the leaders, like the actions and decisions you make communicate. Same thing with
Mhm.
organizations. What an organization does behavior wise, it could end up being the projects that they put out there. That's communicating to everybody. It could be customers, it could be internal. And so you have to be
Mhm.
very particular about those. And uh, I always work in this idea of friction and momentum. So in the old days, when a lot of these projects they were capital decisions. How much money am I going to spend? Because I had to go buy something, I had to buy software, I had to do things. There was friction that led through a level of analysis that you don't go through, I believe, in most cases nowadays. And the reason is that we're now subscription based, right? So it's not a capital
Mhm.
expenditure, it's more of an operational decision. So now I'm an operations manager, say, I need this because I think I do. Uh, and maybe it helps a little bit, but it has no real effect, and it causes a lot of noise. So
Mhm.
that's fundamentally changed. So I think you've got to introduce friction in the organization, an analysis of, is it one of the vital few things we do, or is it one of the worthwhile many? And there's a lot of great things we can do. And how does it fit into our plan?
Sure.
Where's my pickup? Like right now, I mean, in mortgage banking, um, it's about recruiting, about getting people up front, the loan officers, to be able to go out and get more deals. And the POSs have always said, we're going to free up your time. We're going to do all of these things.
Mhm.
In some cases, it's true. It has. It's worked really well. In some cases, it hasn't. It's not been deployed correctly.
Hmm. You just hit on a key point where uh, change management, I think of it in terms of a singular project, but part of that change management is where does that fit in your overall portfolio and experience with change management? Because
Mm-hmm.
what may seem from the top is, hey, we're implementing this new project. What is that extra context around it? And
Yeah.
I mean, it comes full circle with where we started, where change management is a continuous thing, and you need to think of it as where does this fit in with everything else that we're doing right now?
Yeah. And it is it's there's and change nowadays is really coming at very rapid pace, as we all know. But it's also coming from areas that you normally don't expect. When you talk about change management, it's our project that we're going to do at our company and our
Yeah.
schedule. But what ends up happening, and you know this because you're involved in LOSs, you go out and, oh, a company that integrates in with your LOS says, hey, we've got a completely new interface, or we've upgraded, and their competitor does that. And multiply
Yeah.
that out by, I mean, how many service providers do you get?
Oh,
12, 12 to 15.
yeah.
So I'm the mortgage banker that's sitting here with my LOS, and I've decided to do nothing. The change is still coming from the outside, and that's one of the things you've got to recognize is,
Hmm.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of small changes that have impacted everybody, and then you have the agencies that are updating their systems, and you've got products. So it is both internal and external, and understand and measure how much of that is impacting your staff.
Yeah. And going to go with a slight anecdote that will lead into a question. But before we jumped on this, we were talking about a situation where a prospect that we've been chatting with just went through
Mhm.
some large internal organizational change. And they like what we have to offer, think it's the right opportunity, but the statements were the team is just burnt out on change right now.
Yeah.
So in that example, I look at it as we look to implement Charlie, our production optimization platform. The change management doesn't end when a client is live in our
Right.
platform. There is that indefinite period going forward where you need to look back and say, is everything still running smoothly? Is everyone still clear on the value add? Is that communication still happening? Because in this scenario, they went through a change management process that has lingering effects to it. And if our change management process with having folks adopt our platform, if they're left with that sour taste in their mouth even though they on paper they've signed up with us, then
Mm-hmm.
we have failed. So it is on us to set the bar exceptionally high that it's ongoing and we're thinking about it and we're still listening, we're still interacting and we're still hearing and creating that feedback loop long after a client has gone live in our platform. And we're holding ourselves in high regard and we want to set the standard for the industry. So parlaying that into a question, what are some tips that you have for organizations to successfully manage that end game of the change management once the deliverable has occurred, but you now need to be reflecting on it?
Yeah. Let me touch on the first part of it. So
Sure.
you've had an organization that's gone through something. They go, you guys are great, but
Mm.
we just ran a marathon. We can't walk across the street. Um, One is, obviously, is
Sorry, that
staying.
that one hits home, the marathon, we can't walk across the street.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, usually, yeah. For me, it isn't a marathon. I have trouble walking across the street sometimes after I've exercised, but it is going back to the connecting and things like that. So one of the things that I think is really critical, and you have this client, you go, okay, we're going to stay engaged with them, and it's either going to be through sales or maybe some of your other group because. Um, they'll be ready one day, and you have to be there when they're ready, not the I'm going to call you in 6 months, after you guys have
Yep.
because in sales, it doesn't matter what you're selling. I'm not ready to buy right now. So people, okay, they're a cold prospect, they're not ready. Keep them engaged and see where they're at. And let's assume they make that transition. Um, I think that as organizations go, going forward, particularly at the way that the change is happening now, and the rate, it is really creating a partner relationship. And I know that sounds very cliche. We're going to be your partner because everybody says that, but a partner really understands the business at a very deep level. And I think one of the things that's interesting about uh, LOSs in particular, you can get some incredible insights out of those LOSs
Mhm.
that will help your customers. There's, I won't name the company, but there's a company that provided a lot of data that they anonymize. There's some anonymized data, but what
Sure.
they would do with the customers is they'd come out and say, look, Tom, we've noticed X, that, this particular loan type, you've got a fallout rate of this. And so, being able to do something as simple as providing some insights that you guys have from your perspective and even
Mhm.
benchmarking as you get more customers across your customers. You are above or below certain lines. The other part is really, from my perspective, is being involved with them and having regular meetings. Um, the LOSs, for the most part, traditionally have not done that. That's not been part of that. And I've no, the founders there and previous companies, they were always engaged externally with their customer base, trying to always improve the product. And I think that's something a lot of LOSs don't do. They don't engage. And so I think for me, that's one of the most important things. And you're going to be able to fill that information up that cup. You're going to be able to hear what the is working, it isn't working. I don't know if I answered your question, but to me,
No, I mean you
it's really
absolutely
simple.
did. Yeah.
It's
Yeah. It
it,
really go at the end of the day, it may sound cliche. It's communication. It's communication and making sure that others feel heard by that communication.
yeah, everybody wants to be heard and understood, and that's as
Hmm.
and so I think
Now we're getting really philosophical here,
no,
deep
that's
into the
actually
human psyche.
yeah. But going back to change management, depending on what stats you look at, it's anywhere from like 68% to 84% of the projects failed because of the human side.
Hmm.
But you know, maintaining a relationship and say post sales, um, a lot of companies don't do a great job of. It
Sure.
doesn't matter if you're a car company or you know anything else. I actually bought a car from a dealership up in Dallas, and I now live in San Antonio.
Hmm.
Um, they're great. I get a call once every 6 months from the sales guy. There's emails that come out. There's, here's the latest, and there's this. You feel like you're part of the dealership now. They're 5.5 hours away, so it's a little tough to take it in for service. Uh, but it's pretty simple, and I think the question you have to ask yourself is that something that I'm committed to do is, as a company, and it goes both ways. It goes for the person using technology and, am I willing to commit to my partner who needs feedback from me to give, continue to improve my product and vice versa. You just have to commit to it.
Yep. And I love that example that you share because it hits on everything that we've talked about here today. It's even though that car dealership is a little far away, they made it easy to do business with. They made that change because buying a car can be an absolute pain. If you go to the wrong
Mhm.
dealership or what, that can be a terrible experience. But
Yeah.
they made it easy. And it's probably because of the communication. And when we talked about that end game, like, okay, you got your car, they could have easily never called you again, whatever. But they picked up the phone and reached out. And now you feel heard, you feel
Mhm.
valued, you said it, you feel like you're part of that team. And it, that's that old school mentality of the dealerships like, hey, come on down, your local dealership. Well,
Yeah.
you feel like you're a part of that family. And
Yeah.
there's no reason why within change within this industry, whether it's changing an origination platform or any other technology, there should be that familial feel to it, that feeling of belonging and being heard. And that's
Mhm.
what that dealership did for you.
Yeah. I'll drive 5.5 hours to buy a new car, not to
Yeah.
get my oil changed, but I'll do that. And if you think about the mortgage business, these I think these statistics are probably still there. Um, you have mortgage companies have about a 19 to 23% retention rate of loans that they
Mhm.
service for the next transaction.
Sure.
That's horrible. And as long as I've been in the business, we've talked about how bad it is. Now there's some companies that are exceptions to that, but you look at it and it's a business. Mortgage bankers are relationship oriented. Independent mortgage bankers, you're selling the same product to the same people at roughly the same price. The biggest differentiator is the experience that you provide. Now there may be a loan program or something else, but the experience is what you provide, and that's the competency of your staff. The we'll call it the nowadays this technology you have to interface and all of that. But those are the things you have to pay attention to, and can you adjust? There's a lot of technologies,
Mhm.
old days, which was, oh, we're going to have an update on that. It's on our roadmap. When's it coming out? Well, it's about 18 months, maybe 24 months from now. So those days are gone. I think nowadays it's very iterative
Mhm.
in the way that you approach, but that also is part of the
Sure.
cognitive debt.
So, Mike, as we come to a close here, yeah, my three biggest takeaways and things to keep an eye out for are the fact that change is continuous and only going to be happening more frequently and at a faster
Mhm.
velocity. So you need to be cognizant of that overall load on your team. You need to be aware of the people impact. And how is your team feeling? Are their voices being heard? Are you potentially pivoting to make sure that you are communicating properly to them the value of that change? And then the third piece, just mention it, is communication, communication, communication.
Mhm.
Because the more you communicate and the more clear and concise that you communicate during the process or even after the change has occurred, is how you win in the long run. Is there anything else that you would want to bring to the table as we bring things to a close here?
Yeah, no, I think you hit, the three main points. There is, I think, the other one is this: be curious. If you're leading a company, be curious.
Hmm.
Um, you know, go out there and listen. And get out of the office, talk to people. It's your job, and that's a little bit of what we're talking about with all this new technology. Is what, you're not going to have to do the tech checking. You're going to be able to talk to more people. You're going to be able to do these things. I think leaders have got to commit to that. I do want to just say one thing.
Sure.
We talk about the engagement level of the staff, but I think it's important that if you're running a company or you have a department, is what's the engagement level of the leaders? There's That's the same issue that you have. I mean, you could have a CEO that's highly engaged. You could have somebody in the C-suite that's not. So, and it's got to
Sure.
start there, because it's that silent communication, leadership silent communication. If Bob over here is disengaged and he is the SVP of operations, it cascades.
Sure.
It flows down. So, be very cognizant of that.
Absolutely. Well, Mike, truly appreciate it. I'm sure we could keep talking and we'll definitely have to do a follow-up on this, but
Well,
truly appreciate your time and insights here. Myself learned a lot. For those of you tuning in, if you have some questions, you know where to find both of us. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. Mike, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
you know what? LinkedIn is probably the
Sure.
easiest. Website is going to end up being Moorhouse Group .com. And but yeah, LinkedIn is real easy. I keep tabs on that. And then there's a lot of things I push out through LinkedIn, a lot of articles and and things. So happy to talk to anybody and just reach out and let's get ready for 2026.
Yes, sir. Truly appreciate it. And for those looking to get in contact with us at Wilco, you may reach out to us at wilco.com/more info. Plenty more to come. Mike, again, thank you so much. Truly an incredible conversation. We'll be seeing everyone again soon. Take care.
Tom, thank you.